So I'm going to do my best here to kind of like channel in a message that I feel is coming through. And maybe it's because it's like intense eclipse season now, but it's just coming through really erratically. And I tried to like make notes about this. But I'm just going to try to like talk and let this come through. But this is about developing into our potential. And this is about the tension between like getting started versus continuing, and how to know like when to keep going versus when to kind of stop or shift course. And that what this is really about is like stepping into your own creative flow and just really trusting that, and being able to stay open in the right way to continue receiving like updated information. So this is kind of like, I imagine like I'm not a surfer, but like surfing a wave and just being able to like get in the right space, the right timing, the right flow, and then you can really ride the wave. You can make like some decisions in advance, like what you're gonna wear or what day you're gonna go surfing or like your surfboard, but a certain extent, a very large portion of your work might be determined by like energetic forces and conjunctions that you will have no awareness of. So a lot of the advice that you'll hear out there seems to pertain to like getting started. I don't know if you've noticed this, but very little of it is about like how to keep going. And there's difficulties with both. But there's the difficulties with getting started, I don't think are anywhere near the way they are with like continuing, and the persistence and the mindset that you need to keep going. So let's just think about this whole like getting started. Think about your favorite influencers, solopreneurs, business leaders are often just, you'll hear them talking about like, you just need to make that first post. Like, is anyone at this point still like hedging or hesitating on making a first post? Maybe you are starting a new project or a new account, or maybe you're on a new platform, but by and large, I don't think that's really the issue anymore. There are other difficulties with getting started, right? Like there's a lot of decision making that does go into it. Some we want to think about like, is this the right way I'm presenting myself? Is this the right kind of container for my ideas and what I might want to do? Sometimes we'll get hung up on like finding the right like name, for example, for our project. We may have conflicting names, we may have multiple projects. And so there is definitely some kind of legitimate like dance you have to do with your intuition for a while before you can feel like you can really step through one of these doorways. So the trick here is just like obviously not to get caught forever in that, and to know that you can continue to develop and continue to like grow your idea and like add to it, and change directions as you go. As for names, like names are a funny thing because I'm always reminded of the story of Kodak. The Now everybody knows that brand, right? But like when it started, they just wanted to come up with like a unique name that didn't have any kinds of connotations or preconceived ideas that people would associate with it. And so Kodak just meant nothing. It was just literally, a new combination of syllables and consonants, basically. And through history, through their accomplishments, and they kind of, we infused meaning into that brand name. But when it comes to like highly creative, highly spiritual endeavors, and when I say that in this context, what I mean is like multidimensional, right? Because by definition, you're really, if you're like moving outside the box, you're moving past the status quo, you are not working with the existing frameworks and concepts and boxes. You naturally are bringing in more. And so you can't like kind of like pre-limit yourself in that way. Again, this is another tricky dance because in some sense you need to start off in a way that's like recognizable, because we are part of a society and we live on shared meanings and shared connections, and that's how communication works. But going forward, as you develop and your message develops and your work develops, obviously there's more to it than just what you started with. For example, like I can take the project that I'm running here. Sorry, the energy is like really scattered here right now. It's like super noisy. I knew that I was being called to create and share something that was really about this deep sense of integration that I work on, and that's what the aligned self aspect of my project really embodies, because it is about finding an internal alignment internally, but also in terms of your higher self, your higher guidance. And the other side of this was the aspect of self review, like reviewing your own development, reviewing your own historical threads, reviewing your own kind of intuitive history, I would say. And so this gets like really kind of deep and a bit more complex. But so far, I mean, if you look just at my channel here, I've been talking a lot about neurocomplexity, about giftedness, and there's so much more that I could go into that I haven't necessarily yet, because this is partly so far about meeting you guys where you are and speaking in a manner that allows me and the algorithm to find you. And so right now, this facet of giftedness and how we're developing our gifts is one of the points on which what I'm here to share and help you develop is, that's kind of like the shared aspect that will allow me to do that. But you guys, I can tell you, far more difficult than getting started is just actually continuing. And this video is an example. I've had to restart recording on this like 10 times, I swear, and it could be the eclipse doing this. But so there's a lot of kinds of like support we get when we start something. First of all, it's easy to start because you get a dopamine rush, right? Chasing novelty, it's exciting. You get to like study something new, you have to prep. And then there's also like a real element of like beginner's luck. And if you're starting on a new platform, I do see that platforms have a way of their individual algorithms kind of like boost you to kind of like encourage you to keep posting, to stay there. And and of course, yeah, there's many, as I said, many influencers, and there's many programs that are really kind of built around just getting you started, getting you set up, basically. And there's much less once it comes to the middle part, like persisting, the consistency, continuing when you feel like maybe you don't have any results, or you're not sure if you're making a difference, or it's not clear like if anyone is paying attention or really cares about your work. And Seth Godin, so he wrote this pretty nice book called The Gap, which, though it is still completely ambiguous, I read that so carefully and it didn't ultimately help. Like, I was, with what I was using it for at the time, it just leaves it completely ambiguous, whether it's about like this is a moment for like changing course, or if this gap is about the space where you're just meant to like continue. This is the place where other people quit, and so on. But I think, there's like 3 reframes that you can do here to kind of like get yourself through the persistence gap, as it were. So the first like pertains to this aspect of recognition, which is different than, this is not like validation seeking, but obviously if you set out for your work to make a meaningful impact, recognition is obviously some kind of like indicator of that. It's like a component of that. And so you may take it as a sign of like, well, I don't know if my work has made an impact yet. But keep in mind that like one thing that I've learned so far is that many, many people will be watching and listening to you, and they may not comment. Like, you may never know who they are, you may never hear them. It may be months. Okay, I had to pause this because the neighbors were out talking and they were pretty loud. But basically, it may be months before you hear from somebody who has been like watching your videos, for example, or reading your posts, and then they comment like how much this helped them sort something out. And so, yeah, recognition is a tricky thing because it's not always something that's going to come at face value. The other reframe is that you're definitely going to need a growth mindset to continue with anything, because by definition, like, you're living through it, you're changing, you're learning as you go. Life continues as you go, and so it's kind of like, to continue to create a continuity, you're going to see the things that change. You're going to have to, like, keep up with what you learn, new information. You're going to have to, like, really use your own judgment and, like, review where you've been. So there's a lot more involved with, like, persistence and continuing than there is with just getting something started. And then there's the question of sustainability. So if you're just doing something for, like, solely some external motivation, or because you were using, like, somebody else's map, or any of these things that come from outside of you, then the chances are much higher that you may not continue, because so many other things come in and interrupt your path, and you won't have your so-called mission or purpose or your why or your overall perspective, like, fully grounded and embodied in who you are and your own personal path of development, because that's what's going to allow you to actually continue. So, the three things that I would really say right now that will help you continue with your process, continue with your project, is definitely being open, having openness to change and to learning, and especially to reviewing yourself. Review your methods, review where you've been, review and be open to your own natural process of growth. Your interests may move a little bit. Just be open to all of that, because as long as you are, it's going to stay integrated. There's a great quotation that Sarah Kendzior, if you know her, this critic, recently wrote, and she said something like, "You're not a contradiction in terms if you're the one writing the terms." Now, the second point, and you'll hear this from a lot of artists, but that is that you have to be willing to allow for your process to get messy. For example, this video. There's so many reasons why I should have stopped and couldn't continue this video, but I just continued because I wanted to finish it. And so everything you create isn't going to be of the same so-called quality, which is, we can talk about that anyway, because it's really about, like, the energy that you're bringing into a thing, the insights that you might have along the way, and all kinds of things you can't really predetermine in a top-down manner. And the final piece, which is huge, of course, is that you kind of have to learn how to become insensitized to your perceived ideas about how other people may perceive you or think about you or judge you, or how you anticipate that might happen. I can't tell you how long this held me back. And but not even, I'm not even talking about doing these videos, but just in life in general, like, that kind of, this is, like, super innate to the struggles that gifted empaths go through. You can see my earlier work. I've written on gifted empaths. Our unique wounds come from our unique strengths. And this is the kind of sensitivity, especially if you're a relational empath. Oh my God. But the thing is that for any given person, they're only going to be seeing, like, part of your journey anyway. And even that part, they're only going to be seeing, like, the aspect that they're able to relate to, given where they are in their own journey and their own level of consciousness at the time. So that also might change in the future, right? Like, many people are growing. They'll come back around, they will listen to you again, they'll see you with new eyes. And a weird thing that I've noticed is how many people, for example, maybe they were authority figures or people you respected, colleagues who you thought were, like, real proponents of, like, XYZ. And so you didn't want to, like, you know, tell them that you were doing, like, ABC because maybe they were against that or something. Watch it change. Like, give it 5 years, see where they are then. A lot of people are also remarkably inconsistent, and so I wouldn't want you to make the mistake that I have, for example, of, like, letting that impact a decision that you might make, because I can think of at least a couple of situations where several years later I've heard from the person or I've seen what they've been doing, and it was like, the exact opposite of what they were like advocating to me about not doing, and then they were doing it, and meanwhile I had held myself back from doing that because I respected them. And so the whole point here is also just to not listen as much in the way that we are maybe want to do as gifted empaths, because obviously for some people, for part of the population, they need to listen a lot more because like they just don't, like they're not really on that frequency to begin with. Gifted empaths don't have that problem. We have the opposite problem. There were like whole years of my life where I was basically like holding space for everybody else and what everybody else thought, and I was just listening. I was listening to all of it. Like I couldn't listen anymore. So listening is the opposite problem. We do not have that problem as gifted empaths. This whole idea of like don't give up, this is about a few things, but this process is about learning dedication, learning devotion. As someone once said, what is so worth doing that you would be okay if you died trying to do it? That's a little bit extreme, but it's getting close to like the level of what you are investing. You're investing your life, so you might as well fully accept that that's what you're investing, and to understand this as a practice of devotion and dedication, because I think it kind of builds up what in Tibetan they talk about in terms of merit, not in a moralistic sense, but there is a kind of like spiritual or energetic merit that I think builds up when you dedicate your something to a certain project, a certain consistency, a certain process, even without having specific results in mind, but you are like showing up every day and doing your writing. And it's also about like what you learn along the way through what may seem to you or feel to you as being just like a whole lot of repetition. So I think of two things. Like I think of, for example, a lot of the activities that they do in monasteries, which involve like daily rituals, daily cleaning rituals, and you have this like daily repetitive task, yet it's meant to be fuel for your meditation and your deeper insights, because the external is not changing, but through the process you are deepening internally. Now the other piece here is very similar actually, but imagine you are like a performance pianist, and you're like performing like whatever, like Rachmaninoff concertos, and like they're practicing this, like they know this inside and out, but they're still practicing it. Like can you imagine knowing something that well and being able to perform it that well? I mean, take any performer really here. Take Taylor Swift, take whomever you like, but there's an element of like repetition, yet joy in the repetition. So what can you find that is like still joyful for you regardless of like how often you repeat it? Like for me, just this practice of like talking to you through these videos, while maybe I'd rather not it be a video format, but nevertheless the possibility of like actually having a meaningful conversation and making a meaningful difference and having direct dialogue, which is like, in some sense, it feels like it's disappearing. Like, that's really meaningful to me. And so I'm willing to like show up and move through all these other like inconveniences, or like letting this be messy in order to, move closer to that purpose. So do be sure to check out the guidebook I wrote specifically for gifted empaths. A link to it here. It's on my YouTube page. This is on how to identify your gifts. It's a really useful guide. I put a lot into it. And if you're new here, definitely check out my playlist, which I have done. A lot of my earlier videos were on neurocomplexity and giftedness. Some really good stuff in there. So it's getting dark out here right now, or this is like the clouds. So I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks so much for watching. And yeah, check out those links.